In this tutorial, I'm going to walk you through all the different aspects of using the sales and class registration system in trade school. That system starts right here in the training setup, where you assign information to a class. In order to get a class ready to be used with the registration in the sales module, you'll need to make sure that you have at least one cost item assigned to the class. So let's start by walking through the setup for the class under the Setup tab and Cost tab. Essentially, in order to register an apprentice or a journeyman for a class through the sales module, you'll need to have at least one item in the cost list here, and that item has to be specified as a reg item. Here we have a class that has 3 cost items. Now these cost items can actually be used to automatically fill out a invoice, a registration invoice. So if you had a journeyman class or an apprentice class that needed some books for the class or a workbook, you would fill out those cost items here. And then when you registered the apprentice or a journeyman for a class, it will automatically pull over those items into that sales receipt. So let's start by creating a new class, and we'll walk through this step by step. First of all, I'm going to give the class a name, and we'll call this a test apprentice class. And we need to specify that this is going to be type apprentice. You can register journeyman for apprentice classes and vice versa, but we're going to keep this simple to start out here. I'm not going to worry about an instructor, location, room, or so forth. I'm going to skip right over to the apprentice information, and I want to make sure I always specify my core apprentice classes as the required term classes. And I'm just going to specify a term 2, and I don't need any other information other than that. And now I can go over to my cost settings, and here we can go ahead and say we want this class to be able to be registered for in the sales module. And to do that, I need to specify a cost item. And in this case, I'm just going to select a custom cost item, and we'll say this is for registration, and this is for the apprentice class registration. And if the apprentices need to pay for registration, you can specify a cost, or you can leave it 0. Now here's a couple things. 1, you need to make sure that this is an apprentice cost, and 2, you need to make sure that it's a registration item. Now if you have other books for the class, and we'll just put a workbook in here. We'll go to our products, and I'll just type in a workbook. If you don't have products in your database, you may need to add them, and you can do that in the sales module. So we'll just go ahead and select any old workbook, and you'll see that there's a cost for that. This doesn't need to be a registration item. None of the rest of the items do, but at least one item needs to be a registration item. And in fact, since I have a workbook here, I really don't even need this apprentice class registration. I could actually delete that, and I could make this programmable logic controllers workbook the registration item, and I need to specify that that's an apprentice cost. So if you don't have workbooks, you can just put a generic item there that's a registration item, and you have to specify that it's type apprentice. If you do have multiple items, then any one of those items, just at least one of them, needs to be specified as the registration item. After that's done, the only thing that we need to do now to allow apprentices to register for this class is we do need to add them to the class ahead of time. Now with journeymen, they can be added as they register through the sales module, but apprentices cannot actually register until they've been manually added by the office to the class. So we'll go ahead and go over to students, and we'll just select a apprentice here in our demo database. And so now we have one apprentice on the roster, and we have cost items, so this class should be ready for apprentice registration. Now when I go over to the sales module here, we'll create a new transaction, put in the initials of the person who created this transaction, and we'll select that apprentice, if I can remember their name. And now we have a new invoice for this apprentice, and we want to go ahead and say we want to register them and for the apprentice class. And notice it finds the class I just created. It also finds an existing class that they were registered for as well. Usually you'll only see one class because they'll only be registered or assigned to one class available for registration. So it'll pull that. If you don't see a class in this list, you can't register them, and that means that you don't have that registration item. So I'll select that Test Apprentice class, and it will pull over the one item. If there was multiple books, it will automatically pull them over. And now they can go ahead and pay for the class. We'll say that they paid with a check, full amount of $21, and we'll go ahead and post this to their history. So now I can print this receipt, and the transaction is closed. And you can see back in the training module, underneath the admin tab, that there's a registration tab here. And here you can see that that person did register, and here's the date that they registered. That's the date of the transaction and the invoice number.